Hi, friends. Today I'm going to take two seemingly unrelated thoughts and try to connect them together in this video. I haven't actually articulated this out loud yet, so we'll see how it goes. But there's this passage that we heard this past Sunday from the letter to the Philippians. It's actually the opening salutation that Paul is speaking. And at the end of this opening salutation, Paul offers a prayer. And I want you to listen to the words of this prayer. He says, "And this is my prayer, that your love may abound or increase more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may discern what is best and be pure and blameless on the day that Christ returns, and be filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes from Jesus Christ." Listen to how cool this is. My prayer is that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight. And it's so fascinating to hear. And when we think about love, we don't often think about love growing in knowledge or depth of insight. But clearly what Paul is talking about is that there is some type of growth or increase in our appreciation of what love is. And we have to learn about love. We have to grow in our knowledge of love. And I heard that on Sunday. I was reminded of that beautiful passage which I memorized years and years ago. And I wanted to connect it to something else I've been thinking about recently. And I this is how I've articulated this. I came up with this recently just in the context of the conflict in Israel-Palestine. But I think it applies in so many other areas of our life. And it's this idea that understanding is not the same as condoning. So understanding does not mean condoning. And obviously we'll talk about this in a second, but what I'm trying to connect here is that when we think about love and we think about growing our love with knowledge and deeper insight, what we're talking is about learning how to communicate love and what the power of love is. And in every situation that we encounter in life, we have an opportunity to go deeper in our understanding and discernment of what love looks like in that situation. And this idea that learning to understand other people, learning to comprehend and understand where people are coming from is itself such a huge act of love. Especially we live in a world that continually tells us that if you understand someone, you must agree with them. And I think that there's enough situations in life that tell us that you can understand without agreeing. And this false notion that if I go down the path of understanding you, if you and I have a conflict, and I go down the path of acknowledging and understanding where you're coming from, that if I open my heart that way to understanding, then that automatically is going to let down my walls, and I'm going to end up agreeing with what you did. But there are so many situations where there's a transgression of some kind, and what we end up doing is we demonize immediately. Instead of demonizing, there is a space where we can choose to, and this takes a lot of courage, to understand what could lead someone to do that kind of action. And we can understand it without condoning it. Imagine that. So, for example, I can understand that desperation, extreme desperation, can lead to violence oftentimes. I can understand that. Now, someone can say to me, "How can you say that you understand what that person did?" No, I'm not saying I condone it. I'm saying I can understand that desperation can lead to that point. Or I can understand how fear can lead to someone being dishonest. If you're really afraid that by being honest, there's something, that something might happen to you and you decide to be dishonest, I'm not condoning dishonesty, but I'm choosing to understand the humanity of that experience, that fear can sometimes lead to lying. And so if in our relationships with one another, we can step over that threshold where we're willing to say, look, just because I understand doesn't mean that I condone. But the act of understanding itself, what that does is it allows us to connect to the humanity of the other. as opposed to just judging them or taking action against them as though there was no whatsoever, no basis for what they did. But instead, once we start to understand, and we have this principle that understanding doesn't mean condoning, then we start to allow ourselves to see that we are not necessarily always better in our judgment. That if we were in the same situation, same circumstances, with the same all the different pieces in there that person experienced, maybe we could have potentially ended up doing the same thing. And so we close this gap between our humanity and their humanity. And what is love if not that? Closing the distance between humanity. I think that this is what made the incarnation so powerful, such an amazing exhibit of God's love, expression of God's love, is that God closed the distance between God and us, between this human experience of coming and experiencing our reality, our mess, our troubles, the reasons why we do the things we do and think the way we do. That in understanding this better through the incarnation, God then becomes even a more intimate and loving God for us. And so understanding is not condoning. Sometimes understanding might actually lead to greater compassion. And I want to share this with you today, again, in the context of bringing our love to bringing greater knowledge and depth of insight to our love. There's all kinds of things we can learn about love, how to become better, more loving individuals in this world. And today, my one piece is that maybe learning how to understand first, courageous understanding. That is a really beautiful and deeper type of love. God bless you, St. John's. I invite you today to think about where in your life you need to understand others a little bit more. Is it your spouse or your children? Think about someone whom you really disagree with, and then have the courage to try and understand. God bless you. I'll see you soon.